You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the past holistic well-being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together. And welcome back to the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, joined by my sister, clinical hypnotherapist, certified life coach, and yoga instructor, Tara O'Neill. Hi, Tara.
Hello.
Today, we are excited to welcome Bob Cirino to the show. Bob is the executive director of the Yoga Studies Institute and the founder of Spiritual Warrior. He has spent years studying the Tibetan yoga lineage of Lady Nguma, and his work focuses on combining sacred spiritual practices with business, healing, and compassionate strategies to help both people and the planet thrive. We're excited to dive into this journey, the deep wisdom behind the spiritual practice he teaches, and how he balances the business side of spirituality with his nonprofit mission. Bob, welcome aboard.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you very much for having me. That was a very generous introduction, by the way.
No, and it's actually a little bit, we talked a little bit pre-recording, and I couldn't hit the record button quick enough because there was already just a couple of profound statements and your energy and presence there. At Your Oneself and at Journey to Your Best Self, we try to hit the trinity of mind, body, and spirit. There's definitely the spiritual. I think it's probably one of the areas maybe that in my journey that I'm lacking a little bit in, but I think there's so much that you're going to bring to our audience that may not be initiated or not be in the know or just really curious. And you had such a way of explaining some of these complex, far-reaching topics just in the couple of minutes that we chatted in an understandable way. So everyone that's listening, watching, definitely going to get a lot out of this next hour for sure.
Excited.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. As a fellow yogi, let's start with the fact that yoga is for everyone, of course. But how did you end up in the in the yoga world? Were you born into it? Did it come upon it? Something you were always interested in? And then feel free to go into to your mission. We spoke earlier about serving, and take it away.
Yeah, cool. And I mean, I'd love to pit stop on the very first thing that you said, which is yoga is for everybody. Lady Nguma is my main practice. Lady Nguma was born around 1000 AD. She is, so if you think about Hatha Yoga, which was really defined in the Amrita Siddha, which is, 1200, and then, Swatmarama wrote the Hatha Yoga Pradipika in like the 15th century. So Lady Nguma was way before these people, and she is one of the most unknown characters that has come to influence a lot of the traditions that have come to us accessible today. And so Lady Nguma was a very special yogini, let alone a woman at that time period, like a woman at all. I think that's amazing. But in 1000 AD, super spectacular. I mean, that means that this being was very compassionate and very powerful. And so her lineage was passed from teacher to student, one teacher to one student for 7 generations. That was the instructions that she gave to her first student. And so, you can imagine after 7 generations of just student to teacher, and then it starts to spread out. As it started to spread out, it lost a little bit of its clarity. And so there was this great Mongolian yogi named Taranatha. And Taranatha codified her whole, I know I'm getting into nitty gritty here, but I love this point. I love it so much. Master Taranatha, he was able to codify her whole system into a beautiful text called The Machine of the Body. And what I love about Master Taranatha, his story is that he was born a cripple. And so a lot of our students at the Institute, they're like trying to twist their bodies into, and then getting real upset when they don't, or, they're having all these negative emotions or pride when they do. And they think that, the physical aspect of yoga is, the apex. And then I say, well, Master Taranatha was a cripple and he was a master of yoga. And they're like, what? And so then I say, if you lost the functionality of your one finger, could you still practice yoga? And they were like, yeah, well, of course I could practice. And I, well, how about your whole hand? Well, how about your arm? How about both your arms? How about both your arms and both your legs? How about everything from the chin down? Could you still practice? Like, where does the line cross where you can no longer practice yoga? And the fact of the matter is that as long as there is consciousness, there's the capacity to practice yoga. So I just love that you started with that, Tara, because I'm really, my entry into yoga is not through the physical. The first time I did yoga, I only did it because I had a crush. I was crushing on my now wife, so that panned out. But
So
I grew
it
up.
has that much more meaning to you.
Yeah.
It's brought you so many
And
things in your life.
yeah, there you go. I grew up an athlete, and I did a lot of extreme sports, and so I was like, why do I need yoga? As something athletic, I was like, I'm good. But when I was living in Costa Rica, I was woofing. For those of you familiar with the Worldwide Organization of Organic Farmers, great program, a big supporter. I was on a farm there, and I got this book on meditation. It was like, and it's so funny because I never remember the name of the book, even though it changed my life forever, but it taught me the foundations of meditation. And I was just kind of playing with what it meant to meditate in the jungle of Costa Rica on an organic permaculture farm, and I had this really special experience that I didn't know how to talk about, or I didn't know. It's kind of indescribable, and so I spent a long time finding anybody who could talk about what I experienced, because I didn't have any words for it, and nobody had ever told me about such things. Which I'm like, why didn't I just go back to Buddhism if that was the entry? But hey, we all take our paths. So I ended up living in the Dominican Republic much later with an Argentinian who was a great Buddhist, and he said, "Hey, listen, you should check out these practices." And so he started introducing me to these practices, and then they were really remarkable. And I came across a meditation called the Lion's Dance, which was written in 200 AD by Master Asanga, this great practitioner, a master of consciousness. And he described in perfect detail exactly what I had experienced. And I realized that I was only, this deep in, and there was so much more to go. And so I said, not only did someone describe this indescribable thing, which you have my attention now, but they also charted the rest of the path. And so I said, wow, this is really interesting. So I started to really learn that tradition because, I think that the consciousness is precious and the mind is powerful. And, so much of our experience is how well we take care of and cultivate that part of us. And so I'm really interested in that, especially because I realized that it was helping me to become more compassionate, which is my real mission in life is, how compassionate can I become? I think that's a fun journey. And through meditation, lots became clear through insight and analysis about what compassion is and what it isn't, and how I am or am not, even though I think I might be. And so then, now here's where yoga enters. I read a book called How Yoga Works because the same Argentinian friend, Pachi Coquette, by the way, if he'll ever hear this, he said, hey, yoga is preparation for meditation, the physical practices of yoga. And I was like, oh, that's cool because meditation hurts. I'm so athletic, but I can't sit, for half an hour without being in terrible discomfort. And so I started learning about these things, and I come from a science background. I was an EMT, so I love the human body, and then I did biology and soil science and biochemistry at university. So I love science, I love the human body, and it's talking about this thing called prana, and I was like, oh no, I was like, lost me. But hey, I'm a scientist, so hypothesis, experiment, let's try it. If this is a tradition from the same people that I've respected all these other things, then I'd be remiss not to test it. And so as I started to play with the more subtle aspects of the body and understand the connection between mind, breath, and body through these practices, my meditation quality became much more consistent and much more profound. So instead of being hit or miss, it was like consistently like getting better and better. And so, and that's from there, that's when I ran into the Lady Naguma lineage. And that was just extremely exquisite. And, you know, it has been just my best friend, you know, ever since I found it. So that's my journey into yoga, Tara.
That's beautiful. I wish. How many hours do we have? Because I could ask like 12 questions based off of that. Similarly, it's weird, it's like yoga finds you in a way, right? So you don't always have to seek it out. But I guess we'll start with the basics of the Western yoga. Many people are doing it as a physical practice, and that's often a gateway into it. So I love that you hopped around in different traditions and Buddhism, and that you have the science background, right? Because so many of us have a wonderful education in the intellectual studies of science. How exactly did you incorporate the prana? Was it more anecdotal? Like, did you find teachers? There's I'm gonna have to think of his name right now. He has a mystery school, does a lot of sacred geometry. Rosen something, but he talks.
Sure.
He talks about the same idea. He's like, I'm a scientist, but I know that there's this prana, and I also agree. It is a little bit tough. It's a little easier in India, in Costa Rica, in Thailand, these places that are a little remote, that you're being, almost given this prana, but to cultivate it like in the West, like consistently, and have these practices and do this research when other people are all maybe saying like, yeah, that's kind of like BS. So there's a lot there, not that you have to prove it to anybody, but I'm sure, come across it. And often in my practice, I'll say, well, just try it, like experience it for yourself. I needed to feel it myself. I had to experience it. Many of my clients have to experience it. So, you obviously are having them do the work on themselves. But yeah, to the basic, the person that's like, oh, I can get on board with this, but not with this. The life force energy, the prana, the chi, that's not a science thing. I'm not going to do that. Like, so the pick and choosing thing, is there a way that you go about expressing somebody that has interest? Do you say be open-minded, or back to the what serves? Like, do you just have them switch their whole mindset and say what serves?
Yeah, I think where I'd start before even that point would be, what are you trying to do? Like, where are you going? Yeah, why are you, what do you do showing up every day? And so if someone is like, oh, I'm on the journey to my best self, I'm like, well, boy, oh boy, if you want to hear some cool ideas, then I can share some with you. But if someone's not aligned with the fruit of yoga, then it's not a practice that's going to be fruitful for them. And so, there's people who are open-minded, there's people who are neutral, and there's people who are closed-minded. And it's not that you don't talk to closed-minded people. You love everybody equally, but loving a closed-minded person looks different than how you might love an open-minded person, because how you serve that person. If someone likes Italian food, stop giving them Chinese food, And so what nourishes this person? And so if someone's really closed-minded, and this is, people are like, oh, why are there so many different schools of Buddhism? Why are there so many different schools of, of Indic philosophy? Why are there all these different? And it's like, well, because different people need different things. And so they say, well, why did the Buddha teach seemingly contradictory things every time he turned the wheel of the Dharma? And it's like, well, because different people need different things. If you're able to look through it all, you see that it's identical. But, people who are detailists, they need a detailist approach. If people are totally somatic, then you need to give them a somatic approach. And so that's the first place I would start before we get into prana, is to be like, who are you? What are you trying to do? And can I help you get there? And then if it's like, yeah, then I'm like, okay, cool. I wouldn't necessarily start with prana. Prana is something that I would, because there's this beautiful presentation of it's called the Panchakosha system. And there's different ways to interpret it. But pancha means 5 in Sanskrit, and kosha means covering. It traditionally means like an envelope or like a sheath of a knife is a kosha. And so the Upanishads, which are like really, really, really early yogis, they said that there's 5 koshas, there's 5 envelopes to the being, which is really cool. For someone who took a lot of anatomy and physiology, I was like, oh, that's it, right? It's just like this like meat suit. And then the Upanishads are like, well, that's one of them. But actually, there's 4 more. And so I think that it's such a wonderfully accurate presentation that if you had honest investigation, you would find that there's a lot of wisdom to be gained from investigating these 5 levels. And, not to get into, well, maybe you'll let me know, but really briefly, the presentation that the Yoga Studies Institute provides for it is that the outer level, the outer layer, the outer covering, we call it onion theory because Sanskrit makes people go to sleep. So instead of panchakosha, we say it's onion theory. So on the outside layer of the onion, it's like a Shrek reference. Sorry if you need to go get rights for that now. We can bleep that out. So on the outside is our physical body. And and in some texts, and the way that I experience it and the way you teach it is the outer body includes this physical body, or this physical world, which is like the headphones, you guys, it's not just, and from a science perspective, I saw this amazing TED talk of a neuroscientist who was having a stroke and they were unable to determine where the end of their finger was and the beginning of the wall of the bathroom was. And so it was like, oh my gosh, the limit of me is a mental construct, because as soon as you damage the organ, then that cognition changes. And so it's actually an illusion that I'm casting from myself. It's not coming from it to me. It's coming from me to it. And so it's like, okay, this idea of the outer version of me isn't just my bones, my flesh, my body, but it's the whole outer experience. So then the next layer in is the breath body. And so you can very easily see, and the way I like to teach it is like if you were to take a wick and put it in wax and pull it out, the wax takes on the shape of the wick. If you tie a knot in the wick and you dip it in, the wax will take that shape. And so in the same way, our layers reflect each other. And so our breath body reflects our physical body, and our physical body reflects our breath body. You want proof? Take a breath. There's a conformational change, to use fancy science terms. There was a change in the shape of my body, along with the change of the shape of my breath body. Then a layer deeper is your pranic body, or your subtle body. And I really love the Tibetan word they use to refer to prana, which is the same word they use for wind. And so the Tibetan tradition refers to it as the winds of the body, which for me has been very instructive for being able to experience and access and understand the mechanism, because prana is a physical thing. It's not a mental thing. It, like, in the same way you can't capture wind, you can't capture prana in a jar, but it's still a physical experience. And so your prana is connected to your breath, and your breath is connected to your body. Proof. Let's check it out. You ever feel just like jumbled on the inside, and then your breath is like, you're shallow breathing, you're nervous, and your insides feel all jumbled? Okay, that means that our prana is not regulated, which is the essence of pranayama, is to control the prana, which includes the breath, but also includes our subtle energy. And so you can see how our body can affect our breath, and our breath can affect our prana. Likewise, our prana can affect our breath, and our breath can affect our body. So we see this layering effect. Now, what's really incredible about what you were saying, the Trinity of body, mind, and spirit, we can see evidence of that we can see evidence of that in this onion theory. One of the fundamental questions that the schools of Buddhism like to point out is mental things aren't physical things, and physical things aren't mental things. Prove it. Put your thought in a jar. You can't, but it's still a thing. Or put your wallet in your mind. Okay, you can't do that, because that's a physical thing and that's a mental thing, and mental things will never be physical things, and physical things will never be mental things. But everybody knows through their own experience that your mind influences your body. You get nervous. What happens? You have an entire somatic experience. Or you see something tasty, and then you are filled with desire, which is a mental thing. And so we can see that there's this connection, but how do two things that could never be each other, how do they interact? And so this is where the most wonderful phrase that we love to teach at the Institute is in Tibetan, lung sem jukpa chikpa. So lung means prana, sem means mind, jukpa means to come together, jukpa chikpa as one. So the prana and the mind, they come together as one in the same way that a horseback rider and a horse travel together. And so we see in the onion theory, we transition from the most subtle physical aspect of you, which is your prana. It's so subtle that if you cut me open, you couldn't see it. It's so subtle that if you tried to capture it, you couldn't. But it's still a physical thing, and it's still you. We go then to our mind. We go to our thoughts. And so that's where the two influence each other. They're not the same, but they influence each other. So we can have thoughts which then move our prana, which move our breath, which move our body. The vayus of the body, which are collections of prana, which are responsible for the functions of our body, those are connected to thoughts. So you can see that you have a thought that initiates a movement of prana in something called a vayu. The vayu then moves into coordination with your breath, which includes holding your breath. Like, people are like, no, I can prove that it's not right. Watch. And you're like, no, you're still, anyway. And then you can go in the reverse. You put your body in a shape, right? Here's a shape. You want to see a really great mudra that everybody knows in the West? It's a thumbs up. People think about mudras as like this or like that, all these different things. Here's a mudra that everybody can understand. I give you a thumbs up. That's my outside. I go, that's my breath. And then my prana goes, ooh, nice, smooth movement. And then my mind goes, happy thought, right? Or I say, happy thought. And then my prana moves, which moves my breath, which moves my body, which then gives you this physical outside expression of it. So then deeper than that, that's a different can of worms, which I can get into, but I'll stop there. Just in that onion expression and understanding how prana and mind move together, I think that anybody through their own honest investigation, open-minded investigation, they'll find that there is some kind of connection between these things. And if that's true, then what does that mean about how we put our body in space affecting the quality of our mind? And how does the quality of our mind affect our experience of our external world if these things are connected like a wick and the candle?
Yeah, thank you so much. I didn't even ask for you to help me with the mind body explanation, right? How we need to have them in tandem in order to help our flow. Or ideally, I would say we don't need anything. But also, let me just highlight a couple of cool things that I really, really appreciate you sharing, and is intention, right? People, what is their intention? So, when I had asked that complex question, you so easily broke it down to what is it that people are looking for? What do they want? And then also, what do they like to do? Do they like to physically move their body? Do they like to sit in meditation? Do they like to breathe? Like, start there, right?
Yeah.
It should be relatively, maybe not fun's not the right word, but it should be somewhat enjoyable when you're discovering it. Like, if you're
No, you know what, Tara? What my teacher says is no fun, no yoga. So I'm with you. If you're not having fun, you're not doing yoga. I mean, the essence of the being is bliss, and yoga is to reveal that essence. So if you're not having fun,
yeah, absolutely,
you're not doing yoga.
right. It's like, but then, that's why we play in the beginning when we're trying and we're exploring. It's like, okay, well, luckily there's other ways. There's other, routes to the top of the mountain, so to speak. So I appreciate that. Oh, Robert Gilbert, we can get back to it, but he does a lot of sacred geometry, and he has a lot of like explanations on like the decathlon, the big shape, and so there are so many different ways. Even if you're heavy into science and science based, like that's the beauty of all of this literature, right? There's so many studies that can help. If that's how you'd like to go in, you could find a way in science to get in as well, in terms of opening up the mind body spirit connection. So thank you so much for that. I do, speaking of the sacred geometry, and tell me, if this is too much, but the shape of the body when we're in a yoga pose, how is that a mudra in and of itself? Like, how is
Oh
that
yeah, of
actually
course.
impacting the prana?
Mm. So if you've studied the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which we're going to be teaching the fourth chapter on November 14th, in depth, 10 days, really beautiful teachings. So I love to get into what is the definition of mudra. And it's a mudra is connection. So I think that's a really, so like, why do we do this? Because there's a connection between our fingers, but we can also understand mudra as being connected to others. That is a mudra. And then, well, what is asana? Asana is chopping wood as much as it is, Janu Shirshasana or something like that, and so I think that, if you really think about how things are lacking any intrinsic nature, right? So money's not good, money's not bad. I'm the one who makes money good or bad, but money inherently is not good or bad. Asana is not good. Very unpopular thing for a yoga teacher to say, by the way. Asana is not good. Also, asana is not bad. It's up to you as to whether that method is good or bad. And so, but why do we have method? If method has no qualities, that's the essence of the Buddha's teaching, is that there's no independent qualities. There's no qualities in a thing that are independent of my perception of it. So like the difference between something being good or bad has nothing to do with it, has everything to do with me. And so where did that come from? Of something being pleasant or unpleasant, for something being klishta or aklishta, to use Yoga Sutra terms. It's whether I've been pleasant or unpleasant to other people, whether I've taken care of other people or not. Why is my headstand amazing today, and tomorrow I'm gonna get a crick in my neck? Same. I'm Bob. It's the same posture. Also, I'm on the same mat in the same room. What's different isn't the posture. What's different is what I brought to the posture. And so what I think is really cool, there's a great meditation teacher, John Yates, Chuladasa. I don't know if you've ever studied his work. He's, for me, is one of the most clear presentations on meditation. He's got a great book called The Mind Illuminated, or The Illuminated Mind. I forget, one of them. And he said that insight is an accident. And so we need to become accident prone. So when you're like, oh, I want to have a revelation, I want to have a realization, and you're just like, and you try to will it, like sometimes, you'll go in deep retreat and then you'll have this beautiful insight into something. And then other times you'll be like, I just got to sit on my mat. I got to sit on my cushion for 10 minutes and meditate and then in that 10-minute meditation session, you have this incredible insight, even though the conditions you wouldn't think would give you something terribly insightful. And so he said, it's an accident. And so what we need to do is become accident prone to insight. And so when I think about method, because there's method and wisdom. Those are the two wings that give flight to the bird. Because we can have method with no wisdom, and then we're just churning water thinking that it will make butter. I'm doing the method, but it's like you don't have the wisdom to know that should be milk in there instead of water. And then if you have wisdom but no method, then it's all intellectualized, but it's not actualized, and you're not actually going to reach, the apex of realization. And so it's in Tibetan, it's sherab and tab and sherab. So method and wisdom. So the reason we have method is because it helps the karma that we've planted of helping others in the past come into fruition in the form of realization, because it makes us accident prone. Because somebody in the past said, hey, when I did this, it made me accident prone. I don't think anybody actually said that except for maybe Dr. John Yates. But, and so when you do it, there's so many different kinds of methods. And so what makes you accident prone? So go try a bunch of different stuff. So, find somebody who's qualified. Don't go try wacky stuff that could hurt you or hurt other people. Like, go find somebody that you see as a very great being who's incredibly compassionate. That's the litmus test. no, if someone says they're a yoga teacher and they're teaching you asana, but they're not nice, don't learn from them. So,
Right. Trust
so the
your instincts in a sense.
yeah,
Also, maybe you could just quickly explain the importance of a lineage, right? So, I mean, if we
yeah.
have something that is, sacred, thousands of years old, proven, like, as opposed to, like you said, somebody on the street trying to put prana in a jar and sell it to you.
Actually, I was thinking of doing that. I was thinking I should start a coffee brand called Liquid Prana. I haven't looked it up,
Ah.
but our joke is where the coffee goes, the prana flows, because the teaching is where the thoughts go, the prana flows.
Nice.
That's like the lineage teaching. And so, Lady Naguma, one of the reasons why she's like one of the most quintessential hatha asana practices is because if prana has a location, because all physical things have locations, that's the definition of a physical thing. It has a location. It takes up space. That's what makes it a physical thing. It could be infinitesimally small, but it's still space. So therefore, there's a location. And so if thoughts influence prana, and prana has a location, thoughts don't have a location. Where is your mind? Point to it. You can't. That's why it's a mental thing and not a physical thing. And so if we're trying to change our thoughts, like when I give you a thumbs up, you have a nice thought. That's a mudra. When I do a warrior 2, what does that mean to you? What are the thoughts? You're filling the method with your intention. You're filling it. What you're doing is you're opening the field of your mind and you're planting karmic seeds in that field. And some methods will prepare the field well and some methods won't. And that depends on your field and that depends on your practice. And so the mudra of, something like an asana or the shape, is about this connection and it's about this flow of energy through the connection of yourself to yourself, or physical to physical, or mind to physical, or breath, all the connections. And so Lady Naguma said, there are emotions that are connected to our prana. So the different vayus are connected to our emotional experience because emotional experiences are mental things. Prana is a physical thing. So if every time prana flows, a thought goes, and if every time a thought goes, prana flows, then there has to be a correlation. And so we can identify where those things are in our body, which is wild, especially working on our chakras. And here we go. I don't know about your listeners, but chakras to me were such a gag, But again, get an authentic teaching from a lineage. Chakras are not beautiful flowers inside of your body. Chakras are the reason you die. Chakras are the reason that your body withers. Chakra is the reason you suffer. Chakra is not a good thing. There are three primary channels in the body. The right channel, which is ha, the left channel, which is ta, and the central channel, which is sushumna. And there's lots of different names. These are just one set of those names. As you can imagine, people have been practicing this forever, so there's lots of different names for them. So you have the ha channel and the ta channel, and then you have the central channel. Every time prana runs in that right channel, that sun channel, which starts at the nostril, goes up, tracks around the spine, tracks up the skull, and then goes down in front of the spine, goes down the right leg. When prana runs in that right side channel, you have thoughts of ignorant dislike. So you're saying, I don't like that person. And so it's okay to have dislike. I don't like suffering. I think that's healthy. I don't like when you suffer. I think that's healthy. I think that's constructive. But the foolish disliking is when I think that by punching you in the face, I'm going to create a better world. It's by thinking that through my aversion and getting rid of the thing that I will become happier. But we understand that happiness doesn't come from things. Happiness comes from us. And so getting rid of a thing just means that unhappiness is going to show up in some other thing. So, and Dr. Sarno, by the way, if you've ever familiar with his work, he was real popular in the 70s and 80s. One of his ideas is that, I treat people for pain. And as soon as I heal the mechanistic injury, pain shows up in a different place. Because what's happening is something emotional, not physical. Which is really interesting because we think that if we get rid of that partner, if we get rid of that spouse, if we get rid of that job, if we get rid of the car, if we get rid of, I don't want that. Just like if I get rid of that country, right? If I kill that person, like war just becomes this absolute ludicrous concept that hurting other people could ever make me happy. Because you will see that at the moment you get rid of the thing that you think makes you unhappy that's out there, then something else will show up and reflect your unhappiness. So that's prana running through the right channel. Prana running through the left channel is foolish liking. So more ice cream. I'm happy when I eat ice cream. So the more ice cream I eat, the happier I should get, right? Because happiness comes from ice cream. Okay, talk to me 2 gallons later. Or money. People have so much invested happiness in money. I won't disagree that money is helpful. Of course it is. But how are we seeing money? Are we seeing money as a source of our happiness? Or is money just a conduit that's delivering a message to us that we already sent to ourselves? When we are generous and we give to others, that sows the seeds of abundance that then can show up in the form of money, which is, if you've been among, I think I can speak for the 3 of us, we're very privileged. We are talking to microphones on computers. If we've spent time in places where people are in deep poverty, you'll see that there's extraordinary happiness and total joy. And you'll be like, oh my God, all of my thoughts around money being the cause of my comfort, they're patently wrong. And so that's the misunderstanding that runs through that left channel. Happiness comes from things, and right channel is happiness comes from getting rid of things I don't like. And so by getting rid of the things I don't like, and by getting the things I do like, I'll make the puzzle pieces fit in my life, and then I'll finally be happy. Now the Sushumna, which is the central channel, which starts here, what a lot of people call it kind of like the third eye location, that goes up and down in a similar kind of fashion. That's where peace, compassion, wisdom, and love flow. So when prana runs in that channel, we realize that happiness doesn't come from things, and we realize that hurting people could never make us happy. And that's what happens when prana is running in the central channel, all the way up until the realization of what is the self, what is the true nature of reality, what is consciousness. Those thoughts run when prana runs in the central channel. So what happens is, as soon as we're born, as soon as egg and sperm connect and consciousness enters into this physical realm, or into this form that's now become Bob or Tara or Brian, we're thrust here, according to the school of yoga, we're thrust here because of bad karma into a world of suffering. And so instantly we are preferring the warmth of our mother, in a way you can, a primordial. And so we start to get these twists of the side channels around that central channel. And the prana that wants to go through the central channel is blocked by those twists in the same way that an ivy twists a tree and chokes it off. You can imagine the prana of our ignorant liking and disliking, or our stupid or harmful liking and disliking, chokes off our wisdom and our love and our abundance. And then that prana has nowhere to go because it's choked off, so it explodes. The word chakra in Sanskrit means wheel. Because if you look from the top down, a chakra is an explosion of prana out of the central channel in something that looks like a wheel. And then the petals are the channels that have split out from that explosion. And that's the knot in the wick that we dip in the wax that then creates the body that we call Bob or Tara or Brian. It's from our chakras. And so Lady Naguma said, those emotions of liking and disliking, of ego or pride or low self-esteem, or any of these things where we're putting ourselves up or putting ourselves down instead of being in equanimity, a state of believing that everybody deserves love equally, regardless. In the same way that the sun believes that every planet gets light. The sun doesn't go, oh, I don't like Mercury today. So like preference is the devil. It's the side channels choking off the central channel of non-preference. And again, we should prefer love and we should not prefer suffering. It's the preference of conditional love versus unconditional love, or thinking that my happiness is more important than your happiness. That's the preference we're talking about in yoga. And so what Lady Naguma instructs us is on how to untwist those knots physically. Because in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it says, paraphrasing, when the mind is unruly, work through the winds. Because we're like, man, I'm having a bad day. What can I do about it? Just change your mind, change your mind. How many times has that worked? 0 times, but we can do these physical practices that influence our channels, which influence our prana, which influence our thoughts. So then if you're in that yoga high or whatever afterward, it's because to some degree you've untwisted those knots that have created the chakras, so that you have less of the pain of preferring my happiness over yours. That's such deep suffering. And so Lady Naguma gives us a method to, number 1, untwist, number 2, to straighten, number 3, to gather prana into the central channel, and then 4, to then disperse that prana throughout our body, and therefore throughout our experience of reality.
It always comes back to Lady Naguma, right?
No,
You circled back to her.
Well, it's because it's my practice, but there's lots of other practices that have similar explanations.
No, I mean, she did precede the other 2 gurus that you had mentioned right by a couple centuries. So you got to give her that. Absolutely, right?
Yeah, I don't subscribe that history makes it right. Like, just because a thing is old doesn't mean that it's correct. We should challenge everything all the time, always.
For sure.
Test it out.
That was a really beautiful explanation of such a complex, system of yoga, of enlightenment, of liberation. So I'm going to go back and listen to that and paraphrase that when somebody asks, because it was such a beautiful, visually and well-rounded. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and maybe in like 2 sentences, if it's true that the mind and the body are connected, then there's a place where we can move our body to move our mind. So we should try and see what happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the things about, the history, I'm, as a bit of a layman historian, it is fascinating how ideas and practices, the farther away you get from the central place, they often rust out and they kind of wither away from the purity where, I was at the root of the genesis of them. Translation, distance, time, things like that, you can kind of lose the main message or the ideal way it was intended to be, right? And it's clear that there's a lot of other factors maybe that caused Western yoga to be more of a, yoga pants, get like a latte supercharged with like a shot, because I'm also going to like work out. It's like that's like it's the main thing about doing, right? A lot of people are doing it. For sure. But what do you? All right, so. Why do you think that happened? Was it the church? Is it just, mainstream culture? Is it just time people have? And maybe that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. And what have you found most effective in lighting the mind spirit spark in the people that are really doing it mostly for the physical benefits?
Well, I'm not a historian like you. So I don't want to say that I know how Western yoga got to where it is, but I would say that I celebrate the hell out of it. I do believe that I think that everybody yearns for something profound, and I think that that's just everybody has a spirit. How you define spirit, I think we can all have fun debates around that, but I think that everybody at one point or another has asked a big question, or has felt something big, or something that is beyond this normal world, so to speak. And I think that people, once they get a taste of that, which includes like flow state, people are like, whoa, when I go in flow state, like there's just something different about that. And like you're like, yeah, you call it samadhi, and you can stay there, but I think that it just feels so good to do things that enliven your spirit. And I think that yoga is designed to do that, even if it's gotten rusty or, gotten ruined in some ways or something like that. And I'm not saying that is the way it is, but I think that it'd be really difficult to, if someone has the karma to see yoga as a helpful thing, because again, there's nothing in yoga. But if somebody has the causes to have the effect of seeing yoga as a good thing, then it's unstoppable. And I think that the practice of yoga for people who really do relate to their body and their breath, they're going to find something profound, even if they have no words to express it. And I definitely didn't have that experience my first time with yoga, because I was filling yoga with something different. Remember, my intention was to just hit on a beautiful angel. That was my intention, and I guess fulfilled. But I didn't experience yoga as a spiritual thing. I think that if we're talking just about the physical aspects of yoga, which, in Patanjali's Ashtanga yoga, which there's 8 methods. And before the 8 methods, he had 3 methods. Before 3 methods, he had 2 methods. So, but in the 8 methods of yoga, asana, the physical posture of yoga, is just one of 8. And that's touted, like, there's lots of numerical systems of like angas. Like there's a 13 limb system, there's an 8 limb system, there's a 3 limb system. The most popular one is the 8 limb system, and there's a good reason. It's great. And so people, maybe they want breath, or maybe they just want meditation, or the very first one, and this is how I'm going to more directly answer your question, Brian, is the first method of yoga that Master Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra, which was written, a long time ago. It's debated as to when. I think it's 200 AD, but I'm no scholar. The very first method of yoga is to restrain yourself from hurting other people. That's the first method of yoga. And it's very clear. If you don't do that, you don't do yoga. And so it's called the yamas. And yama comes from Lord Yama, which is the Lord of Death, which is interesting. And so what we're doing is we're restraining the Lord of Death through the yamas. And so what is the Lord of Death? The Lord of Death isn't like some, scary guy in the sky or something like that. The Lord of Death is creating the causes of death by being suffering. Like, that's the Lord of Death. It's ignorance, thinking that happiness comes from things, or happiness comes from hurting people. And so, the very first step, the most important fundamental aspect of yoga is ahimsa, which is nonviolence. And so how do you spark curiosity or interest in some layman? I think that I would just get super fundamental about if they're going to yoga consistently, I'd ask why, and then they tell me, and then it'd be something about, I feel good, and you're like, okay, cool, let's talk about that, and then I just learn about what makes them feel good, and then I'd help them understand maybe things that they don't yet know, perhaps, about how yoga can help them feel good even more. So just take what they like Tara was saying, and then just be like, yeah, let's amplify that. And then if someone has no interest in yoga and I'm still trying to spark it, then what I would talk about is not the physical aspect of yoga at all. Unless they were like an athlete, or, they had some kind of deep connection to their body. I would just talk about kindness, and I would talk about becoming your best self, because the whole purpose of yoga is to realize the true self, so that we can stop suffering forever, for all beings, not just me. So Atta Yoga Anushasana, first verse. I will now review for you how to become whole. Second verse. Atta Yoga Anushasana. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So yoga means yoga. Yoga is Chitta. Chitta means mind. Vritti means the twisting of the mind. And then Nirodha means stop. And so the practice of yoga, the goal of yoga, and the state of yoga is stopping the way the mind misunderstands things. Instead of thinking that things come at us, which is totally ass backwards, we untwist that and we realize that things are coming from us because things are empty of their own nature. And then the third verse is, on the day that the seer, on that day, the seer, which is me, the subjective I who's perceiving, comes to see their true nature. And that is your best self. So there's all of yoga in 3 verses. The whole rest of the entire text of the Yoga Sutra is ancillary. It's auxiliary. It's not needed. The first 2 verses, you got the whole thing. If you need a little more help, you get the 3rd verse. And then if you really need help, then you got the whole rest of the book. And so what I'd say is, how good does it feel to be authentic? how good does it feel to be the best version of you? You know, what better gift to give to the people you love than the best version of you? Does that light you up? And someone's like, no. And I'm like, okay, bye. You know,
I've tried everything. If that doesn't do it, come on. That's amazing.
But if you light them up, you're like, cool. Then we can have fun.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I guess one follow up from me before Tara has a question that she loves to ask. So be your best self, be good, be a good person, serve others. Some of it for the really not novice person, right? It might be a little esoteric for them, or it might just be something that they can't necessarily wrap their head around or conceptualize. Do you have something, a tip, a strategy, something that someone that's maybe not going to a studio or has someone they're working with, that they can just start just to dip their toe in? Is it like a mini pranayama for beginners exercise, or some just basic stretches or poses that they could do, or maybe a different kind of breath work, or something that they should read, just to kind of initiate themselves? Anything you'd recommend for someone just curious?
Yeah, I would, depending on who they are.
Sure.
The first thing, like if they wanted a physical practice, what would I tell them to do? I mean, it's pretty. Depending again on what their athleticism is like, I would first say just take a walk, and focus on your breathing, and just feel good, and just start to develop this relationship of the mind, the body, and the breath, and how that experience is, and then just do that. And then what happens is once someone gets a taste
into nature, would that be beneficial as well?
Not even
somewhere quiet, or not even.
Okay. No, because I think the ultimate nature is the nature. Like, you can find nature in you. If you need external stuff, then you go do you. But just take a walk. And then what I would say is, for someone who maybe doesn't want to have a physical practice, I would say the first thing to do is to be kind. And I know that sounds crazy, but this is what I would do. I'd tell them 4 steps. And this is a mental practice. First thing is, what do you want? Everybody wants something, what do you want? And then you say, find someone else who wants that thing. Okay. Then go help them get that. Okay. And then be really happy about it.
That's the warrior circle, right? Create that warrior circle.
Yeah, man. I mean, we got to lift each other up. And we think that we get things by taking them for ourselves, but the truth is we get things by giving them, because that's how karma works. There's no effect without a cause. So when we cause the mental imprint of us giving somebody the thing that we want, then we can't help but have the acorn turn into an oak in our own life. And so if they're able to do the walking and then do this rejoicing while they're walking, because now what we're doing is we're bringing in bliss, we're bringing good feelings of good actions, which accelerates the benefits of a yoga practice. When we do our yoga for ourselves, the benefits are extremely limited and short-term. When we do our yoga for the sake of all beings, or for my mom, or for someone else, then it becomes something extraordinary that transforms your life, because you start to walk through the world totally differently, especially if you do a walking practice like we just talked about. So that would be the physical practice. Take a walk and have a nice breath. Otherwise, just find somebody. This is what I did to get my yoga practice. And this is pretty radical. I don't know anybody else. I've said this a lot. No one's done it. Prove me wrong. I gave my credit card to my friend and I said, donate my money to this nonprofit that I really don't support. And they're nefarious. I won't name them because I don't need to. I said, I need you to donate $50 to this nonprofit if I don't do yoga for 1 minute 6 times a week for 9 months. And so we held each other accountable, because what happens is, just neurologically, just like the action of 1 minute a day, I start to create this karmic habit. Like neurologically it's a habit, but then also karmically I'm creating all these causes to continue to see myself fulfill my commitments. And people often respond to pain way more than they respond to pleasure. And so I said, spend my money on a thing I don't believe on, which to me is like death. And so And so that's how I got started. And then out of that, then I started finding teachers that I like, because I had the momentum. And then the book I would recommend everybody read is How Yoga Works. That was my first yoga teacher. People say, who was my first yoga teacher? And it was a book. And I've read that book, I don't even know how many times at this point. It's really phenomenal. Changed my life forever.
And that's the question that I was going to ask, is one book, if you had to choose, what would it be? And so
yeah,
had another.
I don't know if that'd be the book. That's my most recommended book. But the book is the Yoga Sutra. I think it's the best book ever written. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, if you want to share your credit card on here, I'm sure other people would.
All right, get your pens out. Here we go. 3796. We're
gonna use that to get people to stay to the end. We're giving away Bob's credit card number. Hold it. But accountability and consistency, like they can
consistency for sure. Yeah, 6 days a week. You said it right.
Right.
Yeah. But I needed a why. Before that, I needed a why.
So why? Why are we doing this?
Because I want to give the best version of myself to myself and to everyone else. I was doing this meditation. I know we're pushing up on time here, but this was something that in our pre-recording I wanted to share, and I really want to share this with your audience. I think if you'll have me. Okay. So there's a really traditional meditation called the 7-limb prayer in Buddhism, in Mahayana, and one of the things that you do in that meditation is you think about someone who taught you something, and you feel deep gratitude for them, and you meditate on their good qualities, which is so great, guys. If that's all you do, you won. Because once you start thinking about how great people are, it just starts changing your mind. And then you start to take those qualities on for yourself of the people that you admire, which is why it's nice to have good people in your life. And if not, then you can think about people who aren't in your life. Like Gandhi was one of the people that I thought about a lot. I think he's pretty cool. And so my mom, I love my mom. My mom gave me life. And if that was the only thing she ever did for me, I'd be in debt to her forever. And because that gave me the chance to be in a body that could become enlightened one day. And so I think about my mom, I think about her good qualities. And then the next thing you do is you give them an offering, something they really like. My mom loves funk music. And so I spent a lot of time, she's a disco queen. And so I spent a lot of time just imagining like the best concert I could ever give to her, and I just like make this offering and just see the joy in her and be like, I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Mom. And like, man, it just lifts up your mind. Your mind becomes so bright and creative. And then you're so spacious and abundant after that. It changes you, and you can tell if you do it for a week, your being changes. You just have to freaking do it. And so I went through and I was like, what is the best? Because I did this for a long time. I was like, what's the best offering I give to my mom? And I was like, you know what? After all these things that I tried, the best thing that I think I give to my mom is the best version of me. Because what does my mom really want from me? She doesn't want a concert. Yeah, those are nice. She doesn't want money. She doesn't want a car. She wants me to become the best version of myself. And so then I was like, wow, the best thing that I can do for everybody is become the best version of me. And so one of the ways that I keep myself accountable is that, this is a little hardcore and some people won't resonate with that. That's okay. Don't do this. But for me, I'm a little, thick. Anytime that I'm not pursuing that path of becoming the best version of me, I need to recognize it as stealing. Because I'm taking that away from my mom, and that's all she wants. Whew. So I'm like, whoa, like I got to do this, and then that was before I was married. And, we just had our first child 4 weeks ago. Who do I want to give to my daughter? This little tiny nugget, of a human being.
Congratulations.
Like, thank you. She deserves that. And so what helps me to become the best version of me? For me, the people that I've come to really, really admire, and the more I get to know them, the more I love them, are my teachers in my tradition. And there's lots of people that I love, but this lineage has been just so perfectly passed down for so long. And my teachers are just so beautiful that I learn from them. Because if I try to find it myself, it's a lot like being in a giant warehouse and trying to find a single light switch to turn on the lights. Whereas a teacher can just walk you to the light switch and say, flick it, you know? And what I found is that, my teachers have helped me turn on the lights over and over and over again. And the deeper I go, the more I realize they have a lot to learn. And so how do you become the best version of yourself? Find somebody who you see as beautiful and learn from them, I think.
Wow, that's a great that's a great close. Absolutely.
That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for I mean, my heart is just burst open. So God bless you and your baby and your wife and your mother and all of the people that you are serving. When you're serving yourself, when you're serving your yogis, your masters, your students, wow, I'm so blessed to have met you, and I look forward to doing it again. So that's my gratitude for you. I picked up a lot of things from you that I want to implement, and I'll get back to you on that credit card thing. I'm already thinking about it, but
you got to be ready. That's the thing. You got to commit. But
yeah,
cool. Well, thank you so much.
Another way to become the best version of yourself is to visit spiritualwarrior.life. Could you tell us a little bit about that, Bob, and where people can connect with you online and what they'll find when they get there?
Yeah, absolutely. So find me at spiritualwarrior.life. Spiritual Warrior is an community of people who are committed to living fearlessly on purpose. So easier said than done. So don't worry, I got you. That's why we have a community. So we have e-learning, retreats, trainings, workshops, practice community. It's just a bunch of good folks getting together and trying to become the best versions of themselves. It's not easy to follow your core values. So we have to take a warrior mentality to things of spiritual quality. When we win the war of worldly things, we found out that we've lost a life. When we win the war of spiritual realization, we realize we've won it all. So why be a warrior in the world and not in our spiritual world? So spiritual warrior is all about becoming a warrior in our spiritual world because it's not easy. So that's spiritualwarrior.life. We teach yoga, meditation, philosophy, and some just practical stuff too. And then go to yogastuddiesinstitute.org to learn more about the nonprofit. The mission is to teach the classic texts and methods of yoga. And so we teach in 35 countries, 8 languages, thousands of students all over the world. We teach lineages and we teach texts. So we're wrapping up the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. It's going to be absolutely extraordinary. We're doing the 4th chapter, which is really, really beautiful and pretty profound. So Tara and Brian, I'd love to invite you guys for free. And if you want to share it with it's a big commitment. The real payment is your commitment. the money is the easy part, actually. But I invite everybody to come and learn what great yogis of the past who have been extraordinary in their capacity for compassion and conscious power, what they have to teach us. There's a reason why it's still living in our teachers today. It's because it's useful. So come and join us on November 14th for that at the Yoga Studies Institute. You can get registration through Spiritual Warrior for that. The Institute doesn't sell anything directly. We work through distributors in different languages. So find your language if you don't speak English and sign up that way.
That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for everything. You'll definitely be in touch. Love to do it again. I know our viewers and listeners got so much out of it. Just your frequency, your energy, your vibe, as the kids say, really touched me. And I think everyone that heard this episode. So thanks again, Bob.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you so much, Tara. I really appreciate you guys. Take care. May you live fearless.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. We appreciate you being part of this community. For more resources, insights, and ways to connect, head over to youroneself.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Overcast. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, keep aligning your mind, body, and spirit, and peace, love, and self-discovery. Thank you.